You are now in the Reality Capture Network.
Welcome to the Reality Capture Network. We're excited to have Mr. Eugene with us today. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So today we're going to be exploring some topics around 3D technology, different hardware, software, and specifically focusing on forensics, different use cases, and that is the expertise of Eugene, not myself. So Eugene, I'd love to start by letting you introduce yourself. Let's hear, where are you from? How'd you get into the industry you're in?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm originally from Toronto, so I'm just in the greater Toronto area, and was born and raised here, although I traveled a little bit. I was educated, my background's in aerospace engineering, so went to one of the universities here in downtown, and I worked in the industry for a while. It was amazing, was a great experience, and while I was there, did some 3D work. So, engineers, they model things, they design things, and I was working for Boeing Aerospace, and then I went to go work for a company just over the border in Buffalo. And while I was there, they were using laser trackers. So they made machines that would wrap around the aircraft and that sort of thing. And that was my first exposure to 3D, like an instrument that was really truly in 3D, because it's got to be very precisely aligned and stuff.
Yep.
And I remember being at a company in Seattle, and they had this tracker as well. And I'm just watching the guy move around with this prism, and he's, it's following him, and I'm going, man, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then there were other, I did some research in this whole 3D thing and that sort of thing. And then I came upon forensics one day. I was looking at automotive and all these other places, and I'm looking and started digging into the internet and reading, and it was just something that took hold of me. It just really, piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And I couldn't let go after that.
Yeah.
So came back to Toronto, worked for several years as a project engineer at another place, but the whole time I was working on building skills and learning, this forensic market or whatever.
Yep.
And so 2005, officially started a company. I went full time in 2007, and since then, if we fast forward to today, a lot of what I do is criminal reconstructions. So, documenting scenes and reconstructing, whether it's for bloodstain, bullet trajectories, car crashes, that sort of thing. Also teach at the University of Toronto. So they have in Mississauga, which is the city just next to Toronto, they have a campus there where they have a forensic sciences program. And so I do quite a bit there. It's one course a year, but I think it's the only course of its kind. It's a 3D forensic mapping and reconstruction course.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and one of the benefits of being there is students, right? They want to do research. Mm-hmm. And so since about 2010 or 11, I've been mentoring students to help them with their research projects, and we get into all kinds of different areas and that sort of thing. So teaching and training is a component of what I do as well on the laser scanner, software, and all that sort of thing. So
awesome.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's cool. So from aerospace to forensics.
Yeah.
All right.
People ask me, like, how'd you make that switch? It's kind of weird, but it happens.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, when you got into looking into it and researching it, it is a field that everybody finds intriguing. Everybody's at home watching something, right, in CIS and all the crime scene movies. There's interest, there's something that piques people's interest in investigation, in trying to figure out details, and then when you apply new technologies that are also exciting and innovative and visually appealing, I think the mix of those is a pretty cool approach to a service that also it's helping cases and problems and issues, and there's a real application for it.
Yeah, for sure. And 3D is just, one of many technologies that are used in the forensics area, but it's certainly had a massive impact on how, people document crime scenes and crash scenes. And it's the new way of doing things, really.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think one of the goals with this episode is going to be educating people. It's going to be, we've got honestly, in our network, people that follow us, we've got law enforcement, we've got people in the forensic field that aren't yet using technology. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of walk through what are some of the different technologies, and then we can also look at what are some of the actual forensic use cases that you see. So maybe we could start by some of the technology.
Sure.
We can walk through.
In terms of technology, I mean, if you really go back, the first, if we go back in history, we got to go back probably to, and I believe it's in Switzerland, back in the 30s, they were using a form of photogrammetry. So they were using stereo cameras mounted on a rod, and they were taking photos, and from that they could produce 3D models. So that's an early use, very, very novel at the time going back. But of course, it wasn't generally adopted, right?
Yeah.
Most people were using, good old tape measure and string and plumb line, and still do.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, yep, still around.
That's not going to go anywhere. That's going to be sticking around. And of course, in the 90s, the total station came about, and in the early, I would say 91, 92, that's probably when the first use for a forensic case, both a crash and crime. There was I think it was Washington State that used it for crash, and then I think in the early 90s it was used in the Illinois area for a homicide scene, and an outdoor homicide scene, and they used the total station. So the total station was really the workhorse of forensics for a very long time. And then, coming up to the 2000s, photogrammetry is, came about, and then it kind of died a little bit, right? And then until drones came back, and then when people like the drones, and that really pushed the whole 3D modeling thing. And laser scanners, I can't say enough about how they have revolutionized crime scene documentation. There is no other instrument in the world today that has that much impact. You can't get that much information in as little time with any other instrument.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And other than that, there are things like hand scanners, which are being used to document, just smaller scenes or smaller pieces of evidence, right? So some of the RTech offerings, they have a really good scanner. Even the dot product now, the little handheld scanners you can walk around with, low cost, but still gives you some really great data.
Yeah.
So that's probably it in a nutshell. But I would say that the top two are definitely the laser scanner and photogrammetry today.
Yeah. What do you have a specific hardware you focus on using at the moment?
Well, when I got into this, I purchased Faro. So I had I've got Faros. I got two Faro scanners. I have my original Faro scanner from way back. It's been useful, and I can't let it go. You know what I mean? So I still have that, and then I have one of the more recent models that we use. And they've been very, very good to me. It was cost effective and everything else. So I've gotten to know the systems really, really well, and that's kind of like what I'm comfortable with. But there's other people that make great scanners out there, and it really comes down to maybe what you're comfortable with or whatever. We also have we've got photogrammetry packages, 3D Flow, Metashape from Agisoft. I use Photo Modeler, which is another comprehensive photogrammetry package, and I don't have it now, but I had a Space Spider scanner from Artec. We have dot product. So we have a range of things that we have used, depending on the need.
Yeah. Is there, and I know it'd be great to get into some different use case types. Is there a certain, a certain type of project that's your normal or your expertise? I know, same with most people in 3D, you probably get it pulled into a huge variety.
Typically, in outdoor, scene like a car crash, you go, it's an intersection, or it could be a, remote roadway, small roadway, something like that. And then when it's, crime, a lot of them happen indoors, right? Too, indoors, outdoors. So if you've got a shooting, if you've got some kind of a homicide, apartments, homes, backyards. So residential, mostly residential and outdoor roadway type areas for both crash
Yeah.
and crime. That's kind of typical because that's where
Yeah.
people typically are. But it's happened before where clandestine graves are usually in remote places. They want to
Yeah.
hide. Somebody wants to hide a body. They don't put it, close by. They drive out and they, find a quiet place and they go out there. So that's come up before too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Is there any of the service, like maybe just in a basic sense, do you guys handle the whole process from initially go and capture the data, you process it, do you then take it in and do models and, animation or accident reconstruction, or kind of what does that process look like for you?
We do everything.
Okay.
Everything from start to finish. So
Yep.
we go out, we do the capture, we bring it back, we process it, clean up, do any editing, whatever it is that we need to do,
Yeah.
get it into the different types of software and, do whatever kinds of analysis or whatever it is. We do the reporting. We do if we have photographs and video
Yep.
and all these different types of media, we bring it all together and,
Yeah.
form a coherent report
Yeah.
for, whether we're working for the police or whether we're working for defense, whatever it might be. So, and part of the issue there is court, right?
Yes.
So if you have different people, Matt did this
who
thing.
captured it, who modeled it, who hands it off,
Yeah.
who's responsible. Yep.
It's a lot cleaner when you do it all sort of on your own and
Yep.
it's all in your control, and then there's no questions about what you did or
Yeah.
whatever else. Yeah. So even when it's your own team members, right? You have to be careful. You have to be very aware of
Yeah.
what they're doing. So we have a lot of good communication back and forth.
Yes.
Regarding the project, who did what, how things are filed.
Yeah.
Chain of custody, all these different types of issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All very important when you're walking into court. Using that data in a case. You want to make sure that's documented well, I'm sure. Especially being that you focus on all processes, from the capture, the processing, the data, the modeling. What on the top of your head would be some of your challenges at the moment? A lot of people say data size or modeling processes, and we like to get into some of this discussion because we have software and hardware companies that are watching these with us, and we're trying to, as we discuss different industries, different use cases, what are the challenges? What are some improvements that you're like, man, this is something that holds us up or is a difficulty?
I've always so when I first started this whole thing, I didn't have a scanner. I didn't afford a scanner, so I was hired. But it forced me to work on the back end first. So I was working on, what do I do with the data now that I have it?
Yep.
That was actually good for me. It was actually really good for me, because doing that for a couple of years means that I really got to understand where the difficulty was. And that's still the difficulty, is always on the back end. Scanning for me is not that big of a deal. I usually get by with what I need.
Yep.
I know what I'm getting into usually, right? I know if I'm going to need to do more work on the back end to clean certain things up or whatever. But it's always been the post-processing part. So you got the data. Now what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And so, to this day, meshing has still been an issue. So you have a point cloud and you want to mesh it. There's still no, press this button and it just works.
Beautiful process.
And so, and depending on what you want to do, you're often left in a situation where you're using this piece of software for this one feature, this piece of software for this feature. And so you're always trying to figure out, what the best avenue is, and there's no clean workflow that does it all, right?
Yeah.
So those are some of the challenges usually that, what you're stuck with. When you're dealing with point cloud data, that's just size limitations and that sort of thing. So we have a plugin for 3D Studio Max.
Yep.
And it's called Clouds to Max VX. So it's a voxel based renderer, and part of the reason that we made it was we needed it.
Yeah.
And so we got programmer involved, and so now we've lifted the cap on size, because we're always, after a few 100 million points, which sounds like a lot.
2 scans.
Exactly. So if you have a billion points or multi-billion data sets, what do you do with them? And so this tool helped us, with lift that cap. So we use that with most of our cases.
I could see that being even a bigger challenge for forensics specifically because of that limit size. We've only done some forensic work, mostly delivering to people that are dealing with some of the data, not taking it full service, but hearing like, hey, we normally do hundreds of scans of a building and we stick that in Revit and we use it, or Recap. And then we get requests like, hey, we need to take this into this other third-party software that has a plugin, but it needs to be like 1 gig or something. Or like, well, shoot, that's like a 20th of the data. I mean, it's, so I think,
good luck.
I think, continuing to find ways to make the data smaller without losing density, file compression, I think is something for everybody to focus on. I think that's still a big point. What about, have you gotten into like mobile scanning applications? Obviously there's the terrestrial scanners, then you've got the handhelds, the backpacks, those, the carts, those mobile solutions. Are any of those, you think, to the level that you would need within a forensic project, or not quite,
I think I think they're getting there. It's getting there.
Closer.
So I've had some experience, like with the GeoSlam, with the Heron system. I've seen some of the Pegasus data. So it's getting there. I mean, and it's always a balance between, the cost and the use and, what it is, the speed and what it is you're trying to get out of it. So for most police agencies, although they'll tell you maybe, for example, time is important, and in some cases it is. Like if you shut down a roadway and it's a main artery, there's money that that's being lost if people aren't traveling. But that happens once in a while. But if it's your typical fender bender, whatever, they'll go in, they a couple hours, whatever, and then they're done and they kind of get out of there. So they can, and with the scanner you can capture a lot of data in a very short period of time. So that's not that big of a deal. But I think that as things progress and we get a little bit more accuracy, a little bit more speed, a little bit better processing, like the post-processing, and it becomes a simpler process. You have to remember, police especially, it's not like here's a scanner and now go play with it. It's like you're the latent print guy, you're doing this, you're doing these 10 other jobs. Oh, and here's the laser scanner. Right? So it needs to be simple.
Simple, seamless, doesn't need a ton of complexity. Like these, the police are being asked and being pulled in so many different directions these days. And the people that work in forensic ident and stuff like that, they got their lights and cameras, they're doing all kinds of different stuff. Right? So if they've got a mobile system and it's complex, whatever, it's not even going to work for them. It's just reasonable. But it's the way of the future. It really is, I think. Documenting crash scenes, getting out and just being able to get around and, very quickly documenting a scene like that, that's a perfect application. Where I think the current use case that we probably see more, and we've done a few of as well, is because of some of the limitations of, again, hardware cost, accuracy. We kind of see like, okay, use the terrestrial scanner because it's really dense and accurate for the immediate area, and then maybe drone the surrounding area, because it's like you lose some of the quality, but you get the overall site conditions, and then for the areas where your evidence might be or needing that accuracy, then the terrestrial scanning being kind of the best bet. Do you typically scan with images in color? I would think so, but
always in color. Very, very rare that you don't, unless you find yourself in a situation where you just like you don't have lighting and it's
you got to fly through a dark room or something, or
I mean, but otherwise always
I would have thought so.
I mean, even in, like, we've had fire scenes and things like that where it's just black, hard and black, and so but we bring our own lighting and just light it up, and it just helps with the context too.
Awesome. Let's touch one more on hardware, software, and then I'd like to get into some use case, kind of digging in there a little bit. Have you taken the step to like either look into or actively utilize some of the newer technologies after a deliverable is created. So virtual walkthroughs with virtual reality for scenes, or into like AR things, or 3D printing, any of those,
So yeah, we jumped on that pretty early.
Yep.
So we were doing it before
it was cool.
Before most people. So I mean, the 3D printing stuff it's been years now that we've been doing 3D printing, right? So we have we've had like little, for example, I've taken like a footprint, for example, and I've made a model of it. Skulls, just little things like this that we've been able to print up. And I mean, we use a 3D printer, for example. We make our own little cones for our trajectory rods, where you use the cones to help center a trajectory rod. So it's great for practical purposes, for visual purposes. But you need the right case for it, right? You don't just print everything up.
Sure.
And then with virtual reality, we have we did a bunch of stuff using various software and systems. VSys Arena 4D, Faro Scene has a good VR integration. We've done some stuff with Factual VR out of New Jersey. We did some with the reality and virtual reality. I call them River RIVR in the UK. Experimenting with some of their systems. So there's some things. There's definitely some things to be said for virtual reality. There are some benefits, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Because it's still not at a level where everybody's comfortable in it. And you really need to separate, where is the utility of VR versus the coolness factor. So it's cool.
So one thing I would think, obviously it's already to the point that this data, this process is proven and it's being taken in court, right? I mean, it's being shown to juries, it's been being used to, show animations, show remakes, right? Do you see it getting to the point that the jurors are all going to put VR on and be able to be live in the scene? Like, do you think, or is that something you've seen yet?
I think one of the first cases was was a civil case with Honda Motors, and that was in the 90s. So they actually brought VR in the courtroom.
Okay.
And so they had jurors put on some things. So it's not unprecedented. It has happened first. There have been more recent cases where people have been putting stuff on, but has it been sort of like a bringing
not
jurors
very
to
common yet?
No, it's not very common. It's certainly not fully immersive VR. I think we're slowly going to see this transition. Now we're seeing a lot of, for example, the virtual tours. So much like you see,
especially right now.
On the crime real estate sites where you get those walkthroughs. Well, we're getting them for crime scenes. And so there's a few packages that you could do something like that with. And some of it's just imagery. Some it doesn't have to be scan data. It's a nice byproduct of the scanner that you get, the panoramic images. But I think that's the first step. And then there's going to be the second step, which I think would be being able to broadcast, the virtual tour on something like an Oculus Go or a more simpler headset where it's not fully immersive, but you can still look around. It's a simple transition that way. But it'll be a while before you have jurors walking around the crime scene in a holodeck or something like that.
And then next level, once we master that part, it will be the entire room goes dark and the holograms come out and we're flying through the room, right? I think that'll be.
Well, I mean, there's a gentleman called Dr. Uwe Vossner from the University of Stuttgart. And so I visited him on a couple of occasions. And so he has what's called a cave. And it's basically a room that has projectors on all sides. So you've got, basically you walk in and all you do is you put glasses on. And they're not like goggles, they're just glasses. And there's some trackers on them, so it tracks all your motion. But the beauty there is, you can walk around, move around and everything, much like you would with the goggles on. But the experience is a little bit different. Than at least that's what I found. Your field of view is different. And so one thing that we did was I had a mock bloodstain scene that we did as an exercise for a training thing. And so I sent him my data. So I was able to send him the point cloud, and then I did an analysis, and I sent him the analysis, and he combined the two. And I can go there now and walk into my crime scene,
Yeah.
but you can interact and you can see the results of your analysis in the context of the scene.
Wow.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be cool to see how those types of things, over the next several years, things are becoming easier, cheaper, getting the data into that environment and process. It's going to be cool.
Yeah. And the big thing for VR, I believe, is you are looking, right, from a certain perspective. And so naturally, being able to look at a witness's perspective or a police officer's perspective, that is really helpful.
Yeah.
And so, I can think of an example of a case that I have where it's a civil case, but somebody's fallen off of a gorge, right? So somebody falls and let's say somebody says, well, it's 75 feet, or it's 30 meters, or it's 50 meters, whatever it might be. When you just say what the height is, not everybody has a very good sense of distance.
Yep.
But I can tell you that I scan an area. If I put you at the bottom there and I have you put you with VR glasses and I tell you to look up, you're gonna go, that's a long way.
Yeah.
That's a long way to fall.
Yeah.
Right. So
and that's the joy and benefit of the technology, honestly, across a lot of industries, right? You look at construction, you look at architecture, you look at forensics. When you get people involved who don't understand original plans and drawings, and the thing about 3D data is anybody can look at it and know what they're looking at. It's you're representing something from real life. You're capturing existing reality and making a digital replica of it, whether it's a model or a point cloud or an image. Those are just easier to view and understand. For anybody.
Yeah, and especially with crime scenes, I think I heard the French somebody at the French gendarmerie first say it, where you freeze the scene. He says you freeze the crime scene, right? You have this moment in time that you've frozen, and you can always come back to it later on, right?
Yeah.
So that concept is extremely useful in forensics. And you mentioned about bringing it to trial, but it's also a useful tool as part of the investigation.
Oh, sure.
Right? So being able to bring other investigators or other experts in, and then kind of looking in, and not all of it has to go to court, but a lot of it is like, hey, you look around and then you say, well, this and this couldn't have happened, right?
Yeah.
Or there's no way somebody saw what they said they did from this location.
You just get unlimited use cases.
Yeah. And I'll say this for sure. Every time that I've done a project in 3D, like we do a reconstruction or something like that, and I'm pretty good at visualizing things in 3D. I mean, I've been doing it for years now. So in my head, that's what I have. I've just got a 3D motor up there that just, I can see things spinning around. And some people don't do that as well. But even though I would consider myself pretty good at it, I always learn something. We always discover something that we didn't notice before, or we couldn't, or maybe I had a hunch that, this is probably what's going to come out. But then when you really look at it, it's like, wow, okay, that's something cool that we didn't think about before. And I think that's pretty interesting. It's a testament to the technology and how well it performs, for these types of analysis and these types of cases.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good point to bring up, because like you said, you've been doing it for a long time and you're still finding new things. You're still finding new ways. And a lot of people, I think, with new technology, sometimes they think, I purchased it, I'm scanning, like, what's wrong? Why am I not getting these outcomes I've heard about or seen? Or, there's a lot of expertise that goes into it, which even brings up, probably why you're doing training, why people, it takes more to get into this technology than just purchasing the hardware that a sales guy really sold you on. I think it's important for everybody. What we've been talking on a couple of our episodes is there's a lot of tools out there. And making sure that if you're for the first time hearing about laser scanning, don't just purchase, don't just purchase and jump in. Research, find people who know about different systems and find out, is this the right system for the application you're using? Are you an architect who needs floor plans? Are you a forensic who needs color? Do you not need cut? There's so many pieces. Making sure you work with somebody who knows from start to finish. Here's the options. Here's the training you might need. Here's the struggles you're going to have with deliverables. Because I think when you get into new technology, there's so many times people run into a wall and then it becomes, shoot, we used it wrong. Now we can't use the data, or the data was processed bad. We didn't even know. There's a lot of struggles. So we always try to encourage people, like, get out there and talk with people before you make a decision.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't say that better myself. And like I said, I was lucky at the beginning that I couldn't afford the scanner.
Yeah.
But I was working with it. I was
Yep.
working with the data. I was watching what people were doing, and I was really paying close attention.
Yeah.
And so that was actually a blessing in disguise, because it really opened my eyes to where the problems were.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just get into it thinking, yeah, I'm just going to buy this stuff, I'm going to be on my merry way, you're always going to run into a situation where you're saying, geez, I didn't know, I thought I could do this, now I can't, and this is not, it's not the path I wanted to go. So yeah, I think it's a great point you bring up, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to maybe do, whether it's kind of just walking through one at a time, again, for some of the people in our network that are listening, that may be in this field and not yet using this, maybe you could walk through in simple terms, explaining what are some of the actual use cases within the forensic side. So, a crime scene and, a shooting and a car accident. Why?
Yeah. Well, there's three aspects to the scanner, and they apply across forensics. And this is what forensics is. Forensics is documentation, forensics is analysis, and forensics is presentation or visualization. Okay, so the documentation part alone, everybody has to do documentation. So if you don't do the any kind of special analysis or whatever, and I'm just speaking in general terms.
Yeah, which is great.
If you don't do analysis, whatever, you have to document. And so from the very beginning, it is an incredible documentation tool. If you know what you're doing with the scanner, you can do. You just can't compete. There's no other instrument. Right? So,
and if you're not already doing it, what are that you're doing something.
Right. So for crash scenes and all the other stuff, it's an amazing tool. And the other thing, it's an interesting point about the documentation, and I'll raise it because it comes up. But sometimes people think, I'm going to get the scanner, I'm going to go fast, I'm going to be faster. No, you're not going to be faster, because it's still going to take you a couple of hours, right? So before, what would happen is people would go with a tape measure and they would spend a couple of hours measuring, but they'd have a list of
10 measurements.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Now they spend 2-3 hours, but they've got millions of data points and they've got all kinds of information, but they still have to take the time to capture everything, right? So they just got a lot more, and the quantity of information they have is gone way up. The quality of the data that they have has gone way up. So,
all aspects of what you capture is just better, more data, more visual. And one of the biggest takeaways of scanning a site, a scene, again, this comes back, we came from the land surveying world. So we used to shoot single point with total stations and do topos. And for all applications of measurement, one of the easiest, simplest, and most beneficial is, what if you didn't take one of the measurements you needed? You can't go back to that crime scene and replace the cars and you can't go back to a construction company that they've already put the walls up. You can't go now rescan a pipe, capturing it exactly as it is at that moment, and being able to then virtually pull any number of measurements you want. I think that's one of the simplest yet most beneficial applications or takeaways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times people have told me, I scanned it and then we didn't know, but we look over on this part of the scan. It's like, damn, there's something there that, we didn't think about at the time, and we've got it now, right? So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't realize that until maybe you even play with the data and you do things like heat mapping or something, and you can see, man, we thought that was flat, but we can actually see indentations, or we can see deformations that we didn't even really know were there, with the eye.
Yeah. So this instrument, right, or we're talking laser scanners, but even photogrammetry to some extent. The documentation is so important, right? And what it does is it opens the doors to a lot of different visualization avenues. So now it's not just point cloud data. If you want to animate the point cloud data, do fly-throughs, you can. If you want to do virtual tours, you've got the byproduct usually of, if you're taking photos of panoramic images. Right? If you want to do 3D prints, you can do 3D prints. If you want to go to virtual reality, you can do virtual reality. So it's opened up the door to so many different areas, right, that you didn't have before. So that's fantastic. And then on the analysis side, so documentation, analysis, visualization, on the analysis side, we spend a lot of time. I spend a lot of time, right? So if you're going to be using this type of technology at court, at trial, whatever it might be, and this is something that I early on, it went into my head. It was just a light bulb that said, if you're going to use this stuff, you need to test it, you need to research it, you need to validate it all. And so we've spent a ton of time researching, writing, and publishing papers on different methods. And so what are these methods? And this is what I'm talking, you were asking about cases or use cases. So shooting reconstruction, again, it's completely transformed the whole shooting reconstruction realm and how people document bullet trajectories and stuff like that. And there's, within the shooting realm, there's a number of different things that you can do by documenting something in 3D, and many of which have not even been explored yet. They're just sitting there waiting for people to jump on. Let me give you an example. Shotgun pellet patterns, right? So somebody gets shot or whatever. If you've got a partial pattern, so not the whole thing hits somebody, but you've got partials, there are things you can do with the spacing of the pellets on a wall, partially on a wall or whatever, to make some estimates on distance. Right. So again, it's something that has to be explored and more work needs to be done. Bullet trajectories in general, where they, backtracking trajectories, and even looking at, where projectiles have gone. So we've used it as a tool to, so for example, I had a case once where it was a shooting in a garage, and the bullet had exited the garage and sort of went out into the woods. And so scanned, put the trajectories in, and then I can come back and I can say, hey, you need to go look over here for the projectile, or you need to go look, for different places here and there. So from that point of view, it's really great for the shooting side. The other one that we spend a lot of time on is on bloodstain pattern analysis. So there are things you can do with some of the software now, where one of them is called an area of origin analysis. So if you have, somebody gets hit and there's an impact, you get these radiating blood stains that go out, and they can be on a wall or whatever. Well, each of those stains, if you collect enough of them, you can calculate back to where the impact came from. So now you can say, hey, somebody was standing or sitting or lying down, they got hit low to the ground. So it's fantastic for that. And blood stains or scenes with blood are obviously very common. If people get hit, they get stabbed, they get shot, there's going to be blood. But they're not easy to document when you think about how many there are. So there are things you can do with the scanner that you would never even attempt by hand. So I have an example that I often show that it was just a practice exercise that I did with the RCMP here in Canada. And we did an impact inside a vehicle, a car. So there's blood stains that are radiating out on the glass surfaces and all kinds of stuff. Very, very complex. And it was very clear that people said, there's no way we would even try this. Like, we can't go in and measure by hand and whatever. It's impractical. And with the scanner, it's a no-brainer. And it's not because I have more experience or I'm better. The method that you use with the scanner and the software is the same for a very basic scene as it is for a complex scene. It's just the same of or more of the same thing. So that's really amazing. Car crashes, collisions, and things like that. It's a no-brainer. And it gives you a lot of opportunity if you want, for example, to make a really nice, color, capture and everything. You can do that. But if you need to go fast, if you're like, we got to go quick here. We got a complex scene. We got to open this road up again. In 15 minutes, you can get easily 500 feet of roadway. Without even thinking about it. You're not going to have color. It's not going to be dense, but you'll know where the vehicles are. You'll know where all the road lines are, markings and things like that. So
we've done some like that, and even an in between where we were down on Hollywood Boulevard, and of course, they don't want to keep it shut down very long. and you're able to maybe do color every once in a while. Like there's some ways to intermix. And that's, again, one of those things that it's like, if you explore what are the options with the scanner, how can you still get some benefit, move faster, slower? You could change settings every few setups or something to still get some images or, but even having the black and white data, it's, it still beats. You can still do your additional photography while the scanner's going, but your scans are a lot faster. And hopefully that's one place that as they keep improving even the scanners, that we get that time down, right?
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, it's never, it's funny because I go back now and I'm thinking when I first started scanning and I'd be waiting 11 minutes to scan or something like that. And I'd be like, this is cool. This is fast, whatever.
Yeah.
And then after it got really old, it's like you're sitting there on your phone going, this is boring as hell, man. I want to move. And then it's down to, a few minutes, 4 minutes. And it's still like,
it can always get better.
Yeah.
Right. It makes me of course, this is completely unrelated, but it always makes me think of one thing. It makes me think of airplanes and people complaining about how slow the Wi-Fi is on an airplane. You're like, I've heard some comedians talk about that. You're like, you are flying through the air in tons of metal with other people, and you complain that the Wi-Fi is not fast enough.
Yeah.
When will we ever be happy?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we're just insatiable for speed and accuracy and everything else. But yeah, it's a good point.
So we got the bullet trajectory, the blood patterns. We've got the vehicle crashes.
Yeah, there's other stuff. So for example, clandestine graves. There's an application for that. For example, normally what would happen is if you discover a body, it's buried, or somebody, thinks there's something there, they start to, usually what they do is they grid it, they do a walk through the scene. There's a lot of preliminary stuff that they have to do. But once they start actually excavating, they go down in sort of layers, and they, maybe they touch upon, hey, we found an article of clothing or something. They stop, they document everything. And if you've ever participated in a clandestine grave exercise where you're measuring by hand, it's like a bad game of Twister.
Yeah.
It's just like there's strings and levels and plumbs, and you need multiple people, right? So there's people doing stuff. But with the scanner, it gives you the ability to just kind of, scan the surface and then go down deeper and scan again. So you have this 3D chronology of the excavation. And, if a body is in a certain position, often when they do something called pedestaling when they start removing it. But let's say, for example, an arm shifts or whatever, and sometimes, it moves. You can't go back. But let's say, it's only uncovered to one point. When you start scanning that, it's in the position that, it was found in. And then after, if it moves, you've always locked in that data before. So you have this cool looking profile. The other thing is, for example, because body cams, security cameras, and all that stuff are so prolific now, there are things that you can do with video and images and integrating that with the scan data to do things like a suspect height analysis or match moving. So, for example, you can calculate where, position of let's say it's a car camera. Yeah. You can calculate where the vehicle is, the speed that it's traveling. There's a number of things you can do by combining it with other types of data. Total station data and laser scanner data, photogrammetry data, they can all kind of, coincide together, and that's helpful. That's helpful for many different reasons. I think you had mentioned early on about looking at the past, like, for example, an old case or cold cases. So I've done some like that, really old cases. I mean, like 40 years, 30 years, stuff from the 70s. And sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes, the room or the apartment or whatever, it's the same room. The walls haven't changed. The outlets are in the same area, and you can come back and you get lucky because the old photographs are such that you can still integrate them, and you can still use a combination of photogrammetry with the laser scanner data and reconstruct something. So I did, which was a bloodstain scene. And, I was able to determine the direction that some of these bloodstains came from for some of the investigators on a 40-year-old case or whatever.
That's crazy. Some of the only forensic work we've done is getting pulled in on car accidents, not live at scene, like, during the crime scene documentation process, but going back after the fact, 3 years ago, there was an accident. Now there's a lawsuit, city or county's involved. And so that process of then going to, okay, here's the intersection it was at. Let's at least, yes, it's a couple years down the road, but let's go scan the area, model that, get it into a realistic looking model to use for animation that shows, here's the paint stripes, here's the sidewalk, here's where the street signs are here, to get into that process and even move into some of the perspective of where was the car, what was the line of sight, were these in the way? That's one of the really only applications on the forensic side we've gotten into, other than sometimes helping register some scan data for a department or something.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, but I think, what do you think one of the difficulties is for, I think when I talk with other people about forensics, we hear a mixed bag, right? We know people working directly for police departments. We know police departments that are saying, if we're going to do it, it's only in-house. What do you see there? Do you think there's room for people to help more in the forensic field? Is it more they need to work on training and helping? What's your take on?
Yeah, I mean, the police obviously don't want to always go out and start contracting everybody to do all this stuff, right? So they want to try and keep it as much in-house as possible, unless it's an area that involves a certain level of expertise that they know they don't have, and they can't go to the neighboring police department to get it. So if they've got a scanner already, I'm finding that a lot of them are scanning. In fact, I'm starting to receive more data, like more scan data, where I don't have to go because the police already scanned it, which is great.
Yep.
And then we can focus on the analysis part. But when it starts getting into more complex types of analysis or reporting and things like that, then sometimes they're like, we got the data, but we need some help here.
Yeah.
Then they'll come out. So I think it's not something that's going to be easy for most people to say, hey, we're going to go market to the police.
Oh, sure.
Or, we're going to get hired.
Not at all.
There's also a level of trust that needs to be there. That you're not going to be doing anything with this data. It needs to be secured. And you have to be willing and sometimes available to testify, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Some people are not comfortable with that at all.
Yep.
And having been on the stand several times, I can do without it. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do without it. Okay?
Yeah.
And anybody that's been to court is like, yeah, we could bypass that part. But unfortunately, it's a
part of the process.
It's a necessary part of the justice system. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's definitely a need for more training so that police can get better at what they're doing and so that they're able to do things that they don't typically do.
Yeah.
But like I said before, it also comes down on them to train, right? To regularly practice with the instrument. Yep. And some agencies, just imagine New York City. Like you can use your imagination on how busy guys are. Chicago, how busy these guys are going out on a regular basis scanning, and then go in the middle of some little town in the middle of nowhere that maybe they get a case every now, once a year they get a homicide or something. Yeah. And so some are going to be very well practiced on the instrument and others not so much. So you get this disparity between different agencies and where they're located from. So if you are in a situation where you don't get a lot of practice, you gotta try and just run every month or whatever, practice with the instrument, push the limits of the instrument too. I always say if I can't push it to where it's I break it or what, not break the instrument, but like where things break down and don't work, that's your line in the sand, right? Yeah. So when you get to an actual case or whatever it is you're going to be working on, hey, I can't go past this point because I know I'm going to pay for it later on, right?
I'm pretty sure you and I are probably similar there, that we've broken just about everything we've worked with.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say
that's the joys of being on the front end and really pushing things, is you run into that. But that it's beneficial because then you know how to train people properly. You know when you go to a department and you're educating them on a solution, here's what you can use it for. Here's what you shouldn't do. I tried it, doesn't work, or here's the, unique process we figured out that you have to do to take it from here to here to here. It's important to push that R&D side when you're in this new technology.
Sure. It absolutely. I mean, you said it right there. The best people, who are trainers are the ones that have made all the mistakes already, right? Yep. And the software inside out. And I've had situations where I know what's coming. I know what the student in the class is going to say. Hey, it's not. And just
I know.
I'm just like, just press that button on the left and do this, and it'll clear out. Don't worry.
Yep.
Right? You've been there.
Yes. Yep. Let's see. Are there any other topics you'd like to hit on?
Boy, forensics is a pretty wide field.
It is.
I think for those that are listening, or if there's any police or people that are getting into forensics, it's really important to experiment. It's really important to test and validate the instrument for yourself.
Yeah.
So don't take my word for it. Don't take somebody else's word for it. You really need to get in and be sure of what it is that you're doing, and that when you change a setting or you do something different, what the expectation is, what you're going to get on the back end. And that's sometimes, I've had, I get calls every now and then. It's like, where people say, hey, could you help us out? We got these scans are not coming together, or something like that. And, usually it's just something simple. Mm-hmm. And, the interesting part of that from my perspective is that I get to see how people scan a lot. Like why did they choose certain positions versus others, or why did they choose a different way? And so I always tell people, be organized, be very, very structured, be very organized, and things will come to you. Don't try to cut corners. You know what I mean? Like, I have enough experience now that if I get into a situation and I cut a corner, I know I'm going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Like I know on the back end, I'm going to be sitting there for 3 hours fixing something but it's a call that I'm willing to make, depending on the situation. Right. So, I think that's an important part, is just experiment, try it. Don't be afraid of it. You know what I mean? Like just get in there and really, really try it. And, some people are different, right? Some people are going to be, it's one more thing, no big deal. But it's always nice when you get to a police department and you get those few people that are like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, this is an amazing instrument. Mm-hmm. And some of the best, feedback I've had from people has been, people that have been there for 20 years, and it's like, my job. And they say, you know what, since we've got this technology, it's just revitalized my whole day, the work and everything. And let's face it, it's cool technology, right? It is. I mean, there's no doubt about it, what it can do and sort of the pleasure it brings when you produce a nice work product from it. So that's really nice to see. And you said leaning on people and leaning on forums and things like this to learn. That's really important too.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's most of. I think we hit a good topics there, and
very much so. I think it'll be good information. I know we've got people. I specifically have people in our network that have reached out to me that are looking into use within forensics. So I'm going to push this to them as well. And, everybody that we bring on here, we want to, we're going to make sure we provide information about you. Same with us. If people are interested in connecting anyone in our network, they're welcome to reach out. I know that, like we've said here, one of the most important things when you're looking at, if this isn't something you already use, talk with someone who's been through it, get some advice, talk through your specific use case, get some recommendations on hardware, software, just to get that jump start. Because you can spend years trying to do the research on your own and trial it and train it. And I think you can get a big head start by finding someone who's got some expertise that is willing to talk with you, train you. And I know that there's people like yourselves and us for other industries and stuff that are willing to share that information and do training.
And that's a good point you make too about other industries. I've learned a ton from people in other areas that are not in forensics.
Yeah.
And I can off the top of my head, there's like 3 or 4 people who are I consider incredibly proficient
Yeah.
and knowledgeable in these areas, and they're not in forensics. They're
Yes.
doing other stuff.
Yeah.
And so we can learn from people in other industries for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about this technology. Us specifically on Nexus 3D side, we are not solely focused on one industry. We've just seen the value in all the technologies, and our goal is taking those, dissecting them, putting them back together, and figuring out how can they be used in an oil and gas facility? How can they be used to capture underground tunnels and car accident scenes and forensics and buildings and mines? And what is everything that they can help, solve or improve? And then we go in and try to push into those industries and educate people. And, yes, we go out and sometimes provide those services, but our goal is really implementing and helping other firms become successful at understanding how they can use them. And then we still try to help be a back-end support. Like you said, people will send you scans to help register. We get those from all the different industries just because we've done it long enough in different industries. We've kind of figured out our processes. But I think finding when you get really deep into it, we know we don't have the level of expertise you have in forensics. And when you get into really detailed and departments and reasons, you really got to find people in your industry. And that's something that we've seen issues with where, sometimes people buy a scanner and then they do, try to tackle everything, or they get into detailed projects and they haven't trialed through it long enough to know if it'll work or not. And so trying to consult with people when you're getting into a certain industry, I think is important. But at the same time, there's definitely crossover. I mean, when you know laser scanning really well and the registration software really well, you can help a lot of people, even if they're in another industry.
Yeah, we often, we regularly we get calls to do non-forensic jobs. And we've really focused on forensics, but, and I don't go market in other places, but people know us and they're like, hey, could you help us out with, so occasionally we'll go out and we'll do warehouses and stuff like that, and big projects, hundreds of scans, and it's great for practice, right? So I remember the first big project I had, that was the 300 scans. I'm like, oh my god, like that's a lot. Now it's like, wow. A lot of people, they're doing thousands of scans, some people, right? So but it's good for understanding not even the scanning part, but managing the data after and all. So
and see, that's still a beast. I mean, our most recent project we just did was 1,800 scans, and as soon as you get over a couple hundred, the processes change. The way you QC it, the way you control it, the way you manage it. That is still a difficult process for a lot of people. And then you get into things about survey control, total station data on targets. A lot of people don't even know why they would use that. And there's issues if you don't. And so when you get into different types of industries that require such mass amounts of data, then there's a whole nother process you have to think about. And the data size. I mean, when you're dealing with a couple terabytes of data, it's like most people don't even have a computer with that much space. There's all kinds of steps you got to look at. So, well, it's been fun having you on. Thanks for joining us. And we're gonna make sure to send some people your way. We'll share your information, and if there's anything we can ever do to help you, feel free to reach out, and we'll keep an eye on you. We like watching what you're doing.
I thank you for your time. It's been fun, and I wish you guys all the best of success too.
Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, take care.
All right, have a good one.
Reality Capture Network, bringing the future to you.